This is Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Buck Malick. Today I'm going to interview three leaders in the tree activity in the Hudson area. And begin with a question to Liz Milanofi. Liz, I understand that you enlisted three teachers in the old district of Hudson to involve their classes in tree treks. How did this happen?
Well, I'm on the Urban Forestry Board in Hudson, and I know some really amazing people who know a lot about trees. And one of them is sitting at this table over here, Ken Holman, and he had this idea, he and some other leaders in the community had this idea to create a tree trek in Hudson, or a number of tree treks. One of those people was John Mueller, who's not here today, and he was a teacher at Rivercrest. So he created a tree trek out there with his students. And it was just an incredibly meaningful process for them. They learned a lot, and they created something really lasting that's their legacy now out there. And so when we decided to do a downtown tree trek, it just seemed natural that we would get more students involved in that as well. And the teachers at Willow and Trinity and St. Pat's were really eager to do it because I think they understand what a great hands-on learning experience it is for the kids.
Does this integrate with their science curriculum?
I believe it does, yes. I think all teachers now are really looking to get their kids outside to have some real actual application of what they're learning. And so they responded immediately. The principals were really excited about it too, and they jumped right into it. So kudos to those teachers for being willing to take on one more thing, which I think their students have really enjoyed.
These are fourth graders, fifth graders?
Fourth and fifth grade. Fifth at Willow I know for sure, and I believe some fourth graders too.
Great. Well, we'll probably come back to this, to you, Liz, and to this topic. Ken Holman is immediately on my left, and I'd like to ask you, Ken, to tell us how about this award that the City of Hudson just got from the state for its tree treks, and then tell us what are tree treks.
Sure. And Buck, I'm the chairman of the Urban Forestry Board in Hudson, and I also work for the Minnesota DNR as a urban forestry coordinator. And so I have a lot of background in urban forestry, and as Liz mentioned, the idea actually came from Minnesota. It had been established there, and the creator of the tree trek in Minnesota wanted to do one in another state. So we hooked him up with John Mueller, and he was able to pull that one together very handily, using the kids as the researchers. So the
got the award.
This was looked at by the Wisconsin DNR and their state tree board called the Wisconsin Urban Forestry Council. They have an awards program, and our tree trek project won an innovation award for the work that we've done. And I'll just read real quickly that it's in recognition of this innovative approach to educating and engaging citizens, school children, businesses, and city government to increase awareness and support for diversifying the local tree canopy, from the Wisconsin Urban Forestry Council in February of 2018. So it is a project that is intended to help in diversifying the forest that in all communities, but especially in Hudson. And this goes back actually several decades to the days of Dutch elm disease, which many people remember, and it wiped out many of the street trees in our cities across the country. After the Dutch elm disease and removal of elms, we made the mistake of planting too many ash trees in their place. And in fact, in Hudson, we did an inventory of public trees and found that fully 25% of the trees, public trees in the community, are ash trees. Another 25 are maple. And so we're just planting too many of the same types of trees, and we want to make people aware of the diversity of trees that we already have, and to encourage them to plant something different in their yard.
I think I remember hearing that Hudson has about 1,400 ash trees in its boulevard strips along the streets and its parks. Is that right?
Correct. Out of the about 7,000 trees, about 1,400 public trees, about 1,400 are ash trees in the street, along the streets, and in our parks.
Well, now A little later, we have an interview with some students, and we'll get their perspective on what is a tree trek and what it goes into it. But why don't you amplify a little bit on that,
Sure.
Ken, or use the brochure if you want to.
Buck is holding up this trifold brochure that we developed as a handout for people to use to go out and see the tree treks that we have, and eventually the one that the school children are working on. And Liz is holding up a stake. These fiberglass stakes are usually used for boundary markers, but they work out very ideally to hold the information. And we can see at the top there's a little tree character that is the sort of the mascot for this project. And underneath is a sticker that names the Kentucky coffee tree and provides its scientific name and a little bit of text describing interesting things about that tree. Talks about the full dimensions, the size of the tree. And then below that there's what's called a QR code, a scan code that links when you scan it with a smartphone. It links you to a database at the University of Minnesota where there are many other nice color pictures and further detailed information about that tree. So each different type of tree along the tree trek has one of these stakes there. And the wording below the tree name is what the students are working on for the trees in their trek by the elementary schools. So the brochure just describes some of the trees that are downtown in Lakefront Park and shows where there's a tree trek out at Rivercrest School, out by the YMCA camp. And then we actually have some of these, instead of a stake, we have some actual hanging tags on trees that were just planted along Vine Street. People, especially in that neighborhood, remember the trees being cut down there so that a new stormwater system could be put in. And in the place of those, there were 57 trees removed, and we planted 100 new trees of 18 different varieties. So we have these hanging tags to help people identify the trees along Vine Street. So that's its own little tree trek. But the whole idea and some of the goals of this project are to help people on their own to learn to identify trees, and as I mentioned, to try a new type of tree in their yard, to help teach their children, or the children teach their parents about tree identification, to build community by encouraging people to volunteer. With Emerald ash borer coming, we're going to need a lot of help from the community to deal with this bug. And then to plant a diversity of trees to limit the impacts of what we know is coming with the changing climate.
Let me take off from that word diversity of trees and the so-called urban canopy and introduce to you all Dave Drewiski. He has been the spearhead of an effort by Rotarians to do something really significant with tree diversity. Suppose you tell us at least when can people get Rotary trees, Dave?
Well, I'll give a little Rotary commercial first. Last summer, our new international president challenged all 2 million Rotarians in the world to help start making a difference on climate change, and challenged each one of them to plant a tree. And I took up the mantle here for Hudson Rotary. We have a daybreak club with about 80 members and a noon club with about 50 members. So we're challenging each one of them to plant a tree and to encourage friends, family, and neighbors to do it. And when we saw the great program that Ken and Liz and the rest of the Urban Forestry Committee had put together, we thought it was pretty smart to hitch a ride and join them in the effort.
So have you got one of the order forms there in front of you? And
sure do.
How does that part work?
And these, diversity is good, right? And not just in a sociological sense. It's very good for our tree canopy too. And we have a great relationship with Willow River Tree Service, and they're providing 5 different species of trees that require various things or fit in different places in your yard, so people can have a great selection to pick from at a very reasonable price. These are bare root trees. They don't come in the big pot, so they're easy to plant. On the city website, there's great instructions on how to do it and how to care for them. And so again, no sense in us inventing something that the city's already put together so well. So the trees that we have, kind of the star is a St. Croix elm, which is a super tree. It's just like the elm trees that everybody saw growing up, but it has managed to survive the onslaught of Dutch elm disease. The University of Minnesota inoculated it 3 different times to see if they could kill it, and it survived. So then they started propagating it with the help of Bailey Nurseries. So this is just becoming commercially available. It's the headline tree for both the city and Rotary.
And what kind of do you happen to have the price list there?
Yeah, yeah.
What does it cost to get one of these elms, and what size are we talking about?
Well, these are trees that will be a little under an inch in diameter and 5 to 6 feet high. The elm will grow very fast, and it's available for $30.
Wow. Yeah. They've just recently become available
Yeah.
in significant numbers because it's taken that long to propagate. them, I
Correct,
take it.
correct. I actually went over to meet the Baileys and saw how they're set up. So there'll be a lot more available in the not too distant future. And they're kind of rationed right now. So I think we're fortunate to have some.
So Willow River Nursery will be able to get some to fill the orders.
We have them. They need to be pre-ordered, but you'll be able to pick them up on Arbor Day, which is April 28th. That's a Saturday.
Saturday, yeah.
Sunday the 29th. And if you're busy that weekend, they're also available on May 5th, which is the following Saturday.
And if people somehow miss that connection, the Rotary clubs both clubs have websites, right? And this is also available on the city's website.
Correct.
This information that you
Correct.
just talked
And
about.
each Rotarian has it, both in electronic and paper form. So
So there's another 120 people in the community who
Right.
are, yeah, okay. Well, we might get
I
back to
have more
that.
trees I can tell you about later.
Okay.
Or if
we'll-
I
we'll-
can
we'll
tell you
come
right
back.
now if you want.
We'll come back. Let's give Liz a chance to develop something a little bit about the use of these tree treks in teaching. You're a teacher, of course, and you lead Destination Imagination. Congratulations on all the victories over all the years and that kind of thing. How do you see these 3 teachers in these 3 different schools? You said St. Pat's, Trinity, and Willow River Elementary. How will they use the tree trek to actually convey information?
Well, I think one of the things that made me think of the schools was that there was a beloved teacher at St. Pat's that I used to see when I was at home with my kids, and every fall he would take a group of kids around the neighborhood, and he would look at trees, and he was explaining them, you know, each tree and what it was, its characteristics to that group of kids. So he was the first person I went looking for when I started thinking about the children at these schools getting involved, and he's no longer at St. Pat's. But it just seemed so logical. I know children just respond so well to being outside, and rather than looking at pictures and rather than reading in books about trees, to actually go out and see them and to be able to touch the bark and look at the leaves and, you know, just see the characteristics, the diameter of the trunk and how far the canopy goes. That just, it means so much more. I think it sticks with them so much more. So I think it's the coolest thing about it is this first group of kids, it's kind of their legacy to help set this tree trek up. But every group of 4th and 5th grade students, and you know, really kindergarten students even, all the way up and down that elementary school age range, can go out and use these tree treks. And any teacher can, you know, imagine something different every year to have those kids experience it differently and to talk about those trees, and they can build on it for years to come. So whether they just take their class out and read about the trees, whether they create a scavenger hunt, you know, or the older kids create a scavenger hunt for the younger kids, or the kids for their parents, you know, it really is only limited by your imagination, how far these tree treks can go in helping teach the community.
Do you know, before the camera started rolling here, we were looking at these little vials of, larva and the adult. Do you see that as having meaning to 4th and 5th graders?
Absolutely, I think they can understand diversity, and I say this to children all the time. I say, what if you just had, one kind of tree? What if you just had one kind of plant? What if you just had one kind of insect or animal, and something came along that attacked that specific animal or tree, or what would you be left with? You'd be left with nothing. So what's the solution to that? They definitely understand that
Really?
that's diversity is strength in nature. So I think it's really important for them to understand what's going on with something like the emerald ash borer, because trees are being taken down in Hudson that are seemingly healthy trees. People are, I know I would have been like, why did they cut my tree down off my boulevard? That was a perfectly healthy tree. But what the children can help their parents understand, and what we hope to help people understand, is that by taking down some of those ash trees now, and by treating some of the other ash trees, we can at least try to help stop the spread of something like that. And that we can, we probably can't stop it, but we can at least make it sort of a more gradual process to replace those trees.
Well, yeah. Ken, you alluded earlier to the Hudson Urban Forestry Board, which you've been chairing for the last several years. And you also brought your daughter, working with Liz, right, to design the logo
Right.
at no cost to the city. Wow, is that a good deal? So now you'd like to talk more about the other things that the Urban Forestry Board does, I suppose, because tree treks are not the whole thing. And then we'll, either now or later, we'll talk more about emerald ash borer.
Very good. Well, emerald ash borer is the reason that so many cities are getting active tree programs again, and it's the same thing in Hudson. The emerald ash borer was discovered right next door in Minnesota in St. Paul in 2009, so that was 9 years ago. And it's been slowly spreading, and that's part of the problem with it. It doesn't show up right away, and it takes several years to affect a tree enough to show symptoms, dying branches and thinning crown and all that.
You brought some examples,
And
didn't you?
I
Do you
did bring
wanna
some
explain 'em,
examples,
or-
sure, and we'll have close-ups of this, but the two vials have both the larval stage or worm stage of the emerald ash borer, and then the adult beetle, which is an emerald green, where it gets its name from. The larval stage tunnels, the egg is laid on the outside of the bark, and then the larvae tunnels in and then cuts a gallery, chews the wood to form a gallery back and forth, and before it becomes an adult, it pupates from the larval stage into that adult stage. And
And it works just in that layer between the bark and the wood, right?
which is where
Cambium or
which is
whatever.
where the water and nutrients flow up to the crown of the tree, and so that tunneling actually cuts off the flow of water and nutrients and slowly kills the tree. And
Is that why you usually see them dying at the top first?
it actually does, it tends to be at the top of the tree first.
And explain the difference between what Dutch elm disease did and these
Right.
ash borers.
That's a good point, Dave. The Dutch elm disease, of course, was caused by a fungus, a vascular fungus that worked in the water-conducting tissues of the tree. It was carried tree to tree by a bark beetle, but it was a disease that quickly plugged up the vessels of the tree, in particular branches, and you could see one branch flagging or wilting, and it happened within weeks of being infected. And by comparison, this little worm gets in there and slowly cuts off the nutrients and water, and so it very slowly, over a period of 3 or 4 years or more, slowly kills the tree. So it's hard to detect it until it has been well established and is pretty much sentenced the tree to a slow death.
To death. Is it your sense that because they've been discovered over there in Lakeland, just on the other side of the river, that there are probably some of these beetles already at work in Hudson?
We suspect that there are some at work. And actually, one of the ways that we are trying to detect it early is by looking toward the top of the tree and seeing if the bark has been pecked off by woodpeckers who are trying to go after the worm stage, the larval stage below the bark of the tree, that blonding or flecking by woodpeckers is a very good early sign to look for in trying to detect emerald ash borer presence. So a lot of what the Urban Forestry Board does is centered around preparing for and slowing the pace, as Liz said, of the spread of this emerald ash borer. So we've been lucky to get 5 grants from the DNR over the last 8 years. And one of the first ones was to pay a consultant, a professional, to do a complete inventory of our public trees, including putting condition rating on some of the larger trees and identifying which ash trees are conflicting with utilities, are in poor structural shape, and those have been slowly removed from the population. And as Liz also mentioned, she identified some of the healthiest and best looking ash trees, and we are treating those with a systemic chemical to protect them from attack by the ash borer. So along with all of that management of the emerald ash borer and ash trees, we are trying to diversify the canopy through the Tree Trek program, and we use a new system, again, that's been around for a while, called a gravel bed. That's a hydrated pea gravel bed where bare root trees are put in the spring. It's irrigated every day throughout the growing season, and it helps those bare root trees develop a very fibrous root system. And when they get outplanted in the fall, they get established right away, and the following spring they're ready to take off and grow instead of being planted in the spring and being perhaps exposed to some dry weather. So the gravel bed and the Tree Trek have kind of combined to help us push the idea of diversity, and it's really catching on.
You have developed a really great logic model for any person who has an ash tree to follow, and I know it's on, I believe it's on the city website.
It
right?
is. It's called
Could you describe that
Sure.
just a little bit? And what,
It's a very simple flow chart called a decision model for homeowners, because the same things I just described about the management activities of the city and its ash population applies to each individual homeowner who has ash trees in their yard. At some point you're going to decide first that you have ash trees, and you want to make sure you identify it properly. There's good information online for identifying ash trees, but the decision is pretty straightforward. Do you want to keep that tree, or are you prepared to pay to have it removed? Because if you don't decide either way, the bug's going to make the decision for you. And so if you want to keep the tree, this decision model steers you to some information about the options for protecting the tree. You can treat it yourself. I recommend that you consider having it done professionally. And the systemic or vascular system chemical that protects the tree from the ash borer has the best one on the market. And there's information about it. I won't get into the names that people don't understand. But that particular product will protect the tree for up to 3 years. So it's a pretty good investment, but it's something that has to be done every 3 years while the emerald ash borer is around. So, and if you decide that you want to take the tree down, there are many large ash trees that people shouldn't risk their health and safety by trying to remove themselves. The flow chart directs you to websites for finding qualified professional tree services to help you make a decision about your tree.
Yeah, Dave asked earlier about distinctions between the Dutch elm disease and the emerald ash borer, and you talked about the way they affect the vascular system. There's also something about the way those trees are when they're dead, isn't there? That's quite different, which means what? Well, spell that out for
No,
folks.
that's a very good point to make, because when when Dutch elm disease was affecting the elm trees, it would kill the tree and the bark would fall off, and for years, even decades, you'd see this skeleton of an elm tree in the landscape, still somewhat dangerous, but by comparison, the ash tree is structurally much more brittle. The effect that the emerald ash borer has on the ash tree is to cause it to dry out very quickly, and it becomes brittle and will fall apart within a year or a year and a half of being killed, and so it becomes a very serious public safety risk.
So there
And
come-
cannot be, you can't just wait for this tree to, die and stand there. It's going to fall apart.
And it may well be falling on things, on people, on cars, whatever, and be such that a tree service then will not be able to lean a ladder against it.
That's
if I
right.
understand
And
that right?
if you let that tree get too far, that ash tree, it gets so brittle that it's unsafe for a tree service to get up there, certainly not climb it, but even get up there with a bucket and try and remove that tree. And so the costs become much more significant.
So that is one reason that the city has got this multi-pronged approach that's been started a few years ago of preemptively removing some ash trees, treating other specially located high-value trees, and promoting the diversity idea.
Exactly.
Is that
That's the
right?
formula. Yes, that's the formula that we've used.
Well, Dave, back to you and diversity of tree species. The city has had its, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Liz, there's been the Tree of the Year program now. And was it 2 years, there was just a single species available?
Yes, I
And
think
this
so.
year there are 2 species available. Rotarians have gone bonkers, right? You've got 15 different tree species,
Well,
right?
not quite, but we have 5.
You have 5
Yeah,
different.
just
Tell
a-
us
a
about
good-
it,
a good
because as
start.
you indicated earlier, there's tall, there's wide, there's flowering, there's whatever, and of course, there's the St. Croix elm.
Right, and the first thing I wanted to mention is these trees are available to anybody within the school district, which is a change from earlier years. Correct, Ken?
That's right.
Yeah. So that I think is exciting because we're a beautiful community and trees help make it so. And the more variety you have, the longer you're assured of having that beauty remain. So one of the most beautiful trees that everybody's familiar with, especially if they go up north, is the white spire birch, and it's available in a clump of 3 trees per clump. It's cousin, the river birch, which is a birch, but it has a very, almost like a scaly bark, very interesting to look at, approximately the same size. And one, if you want a little show in your yard, is a crimson cloud hawthorn. It's a smaller tree, but there's definitely a place in a lot of people's yards for a showier tree.
Does that have a fruit that birds can eat?
It does, and it's also got nice pink blossoms. So it's to maybe complement the crab apples or some other flowering tree that you have. And finally, the old reliable, the native, is a bur oak, which is native to the oak savanna that was the landscape around Hudson before the area was settled. So we're excited that we have them. This is through the good graces of Willow River Tree Service, who's providing them at cost. All 4 of those trees that I just mentioned are available bare root for $25. So that's a great price. I've got a bunch ordered myself.
You're
so.
going to plant some in your yard? There's there are a few secrets to planting trees. How do people who haven't planted a tree recently or haven't successfully planted a tree recently get that advice? Through Rotary, through city?
The city has a great guide to planting trees on the website. I think the number one thing is when you get it in the ground. Don't let it sit. These are bare root trees. They don't do well. So if you're going to get it, know where you're going to plant it and be ready to plant it. You'll need to water it very well. These are fairly small trees, so you shouldn't have to do a lot of the elaborate staking that you might have to do on a bigger tree. And then it's like a toddler. You need to take care of it. You need to watch it. I mean, it needs to be watered probably twice a week and watered well. And then trees tend to need a little help as they grow, and they may need to be selectively pruned. And that is also available on the city website, how to properly prune your tree. It's not rocket science, it's common sense, and you just need to be consistent. And these trees should do very well.
Great. Thanks for those tips. Liz, we've got Arbor Day coming up Yep. And this year, as in the last few years, there's going to be something in the schools, there's going to be something in the park. What do you know about that you can share with us?
Well, the Arbor Day celebration in our park is on a Saturday. Of course, it's April 28th. And so on April 27th, I believe, is the day the schools will be celebrating. And different schools do different things. But I know we'll be at Willow this year. We've been at EP Rock in the past with Willow River Tree Farm. I think they've come out to EP Rock and done different tree plantings out there and just educational events and activities. So we'll be at Willow River Elementary on the 27th. Toward the end of the day, I think at 3 or a little bit before that.
Yeah.
And then the Saturday event is for the community, and it's the 28th, and it is 10 a.m. to noon. Flyer right there at Lakefront Park.
You brought this, did you, Ken?
Sure. This is a flyer that you may see around town describing the activities on Saturday. And as Liz mentioned, we'll have a little Arbor Day reading of the proclamation that the City Council put together. And then we'll have this presentation of this wonderful award from DNR and the Urban Forest Council for our tree trek project. And then we'll also have some demonstrations of planting as we plant small groves of trees. We're actually going to put small groups of each of the previous trees of the year in Lakefront Park. In primarily the bandshell area, there were some of these amber maples, some shorter maple trees that were removed, a couple rows of them, and it's left kind of a scar in that park. So we're going to put a small grove of Kentucky coffee tree. That was the first year of our tree of the year. Then last year we had the Juneberry. We'll have a little grove of those. They'll be a little closer together. They don't get that big. And of course the 2 trees of the year, besides the rotary trees that are available, the city also has some bare root trees that are a little bit larger that we're offering at cost. Those 2 trees are the St. Croix elm, as Dave has described, as well as the Japanese tree lilac, that tree being showier, smaller in stature. So that's what's happening on that Saturday. We welcome everyone to come out and celebrate and enjoy a good day out in the park.
Why don't we take a break here? Okay. Today we're talking with 4 students who have been involved in Hudson's newest tree trek. They'll probably tell us something about the tree trek idea and their school and their students and the work they've been doing and what they've been learning. Let's get introductions first, so I'll ask each to say your first name and what school and grade you're in, starting over here.
My name is Cohen, and I go to Trinity Academy, and I'm in 4th grade.
My name's Michaela, and I go to Trinity Academy, and I'm in 4th grade.
My name's Katie. I go to Willow River Elementary, and I'm in 5th grade.
My name is Lars, and I go to Willow River Elementary, and I'm in 5th grade.
Great, thank you. My name is Buck, so if there's a reason you want to call me something, just call me Buck. Let's start with Cohen and ask, what is the tree that you have identified, and what did you do with that tree?
I've been working on the red cedar tree.
And?
I've been working on the white spruce tree.
I've been working on the American hornbeam, also known as the blue beech tree.
Good. That's a long name when you give both titles.
I've been working on the honey locust.
Good. Let's get a sense of what it means to have worked on the tree. I think you did descriptions. Is that right?
Well,
Did you have to do some research?
Yes,
How did you do that research?
we had to research like the fun facts, like how long it lived, where it could grow, and different sorts of facts.
What did you find out about your tree?
that, like, how high it can grow, if it has seeds, what its leaves look like, and, like, fun facts and stuff like that.
Whereabouts is your tree when you go out the door from Willow River?
Well, it's down by the cinder lot, so I don't know, they're planting a few trees down there, so that's where mine is.
And yours is a pretty newly planted tree, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yours is different though, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's like 2 or 3 blocks from Willow, and it's pretty big.
Can you show us with your hands about how big the diameter of it is?
Big.
It's about that big.
2 feet,
Do you have a guess how old it is?
100, 200 years.
Amazing. Do you have a guess on how old your tree is?
We actually haven't figured out what our trees are yet.
Ah.
Like,
Uh-huh. Have any of you had a conversation at home about your tree with your family?
I mean, I've kind of like told them about it, but they weren't crazy interested.
It's part of your schoolwork, right? And you've done the work at school, not at home, as I understand it, yes. So what is the idea of a tree trek?
Trying to learn about trees and find out more about them.
What does trek mean in the tree trek?
Kind of like a hike, kind of a trip, field trip, kind of going to look at the trees.
Can you give us a sense of how long it would take to walk around the tree trek that's associated with your school? Is that a 2-day walk, or is it?
well, it depends how long you stop at each tree, but probably it'd take about like 30 minutes to an hour.
I see. Is it likely that people would be able to get around your tree trek in one class period?
I think so. I'm not sure.
Are the trees going to be marked in some way?
Yeah, I think they have QR codes, and you scan them with your phone.
Aha. The research that you did, does that have something to do with the marking that will be at the tree?
Yes. When somebody scans the QR code, our research will pop up.
The very words that you decided to describe your tree with will come up with the QR code. Wow, that's something. Is there a special color for these markings of the whatever it is that has the QR code on?
I don't think so. I don't know.
Have you seen what the tag is going to look like?
It's like a little tree character, and it's like a bigger tree looking, like cartoonic kind of looking character.
I see. And are you going to hang the tags on the tree or nail them to the tree, or how? Got any ideas on that?
We have there's little, I don't know what you call them, but they're little strings but thicker, and you put the QR code on them.
Will the tree trek be usable in winter as well as summer?
Yeah, it's pretty much an all-season thing.
Now, do you have some responsibility for doing anything with these trees that you've chosen? Are you expected to go out there and water it?
No.
I see. But you'll be able to talk about it anytime anyone shows the least little bit of interest. You'll know something about your tree, and you'll be able to answer the questions, I suppose. How about future years of students? Do you think that there is anything about your tree trek for future students? What would that be?
So there might be field trips where they go around and they scan it with something, or they just have it already printed on a piece of paper, and then they read them to their class. But it probably wouldn't be the whole tree trek unless they split it up into a week or so. It'd probably be a few trees a day.
There's actually a third school involved, right? The St. Patrick's has a class of 4th or 5th graders who are doing the same thing. Have you had meetings with them to talk about the tree treks or work on it?
Yeah, one time we gathered at Willow, and there was St. Pat's, Trinity, and Willow.
Where did the idea come from? Did one of you decide, wow, we ought to have a tree trek, and suggest it to your teachers? No, where did the idea originate?
From like some people who were like interested in trees and like wanted to get other people to help like protect them and know more about them.
And that's the way it's turned out, I take it. Do any of you know Mrs. Milanofi? Has she consulted at your school as a teacher? No. I was wondering if she was the common thread here. Anything else you'd like to say about your trees or your tree trek?
I think it's a pretty cool opportunity to have in City of Hudson.
I don't know.
Yeah, does he speak for you too?
Sure.
Michaela, do you have a different slant on it?
I know that I like learning about new things, and it's really nice to have tree track.
Anything?
I think that that everyone will love it and will like learning about trees.
Well, thank you for your enthusiasm. Thank you for delving into this and being willing to tell people about it. I think that's great. So this is Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Buck Malick, interviewing some folks on the Urban Forestry Board and from Rotary. And we have, first of all, a question for Dave Drawiski, who is the point man for the Hudson 2 Rotary Clubs. Dave, what's this about a bonus planting?
Well, I think some of you may have heard that there's a brand new teen center going in at the YMCA, and a group of Rotarians got together and bought a bunch of trees, and they plan on planting them on Arbor Days surrounding the new teen center. So it should be a good chance for us to walk the walk and get some of those trees in the ground on Arbor Day.
Ken, you're particularly fond of partnerships, aren't you, and community involvement. How do you see this relating?
The Rotarian campaign to make a difference planting trees that Dave described was perfect timing for us, because we're at a point now in the program of dealing with emerald ash borer that we need to involve the public more. We need a core of volunteers that would be available to help plant trees, water trees, even put wood chips, mulch trees to retain that moisture. And the Rotarians have demonstrated their community pride and commitment by becoming the new core of volunteer citizens in our community. We need others to join that effort, and we'll need this continued effort over the next 10, 20, even 30 years.
Ken and I have a traveling road show. If any group is interested in finding out more, we have a presentation. Ken's much more knowledgeable than I, but you know, about anything you want to know about trees and planting trees and benefits and uses. Yes.
That's cool. Liz, you have sometimes been dismayed to see trees cut down, particularly before you became a member of the Urban Forestry Board. So spell that. Why are you not quite so anxious when you see a tree cut on public property in Hudson nowadays?
Well, I was the person who ran out my back door or my front door going, what are you guys doing out there? And the tree didn't seem to be, there seemed to be nothing wrong with it. And I'm a tree hugger, so I was always disappointed to see any tree be cut down. But what I understand now, since being on the board for I think almost 3 years, is that there are very knowledgeable people in charge of the, or sort of in charge of the care of our urban forest. They're planning very carefully. They're taking trees down that are sometimes invasive species or are not helping birds or helping the landscape or helping with diversity. And they're planting additional trees, sometimes more than what they took down, always with the thought of habitat for animals, habitat for birds, habitat for butterflies and bees, and also with, most importantly, that diversity in mind, so that we don't have another situation where we have these elms or ash trees that are all dying at one time. So I think it's really important, and I think you can find a lot of information on the city website
Yes.
about what's going on. If you have a concern about trees, I know when all the trees on Vine Street were taken down, people were saying it's the Lorax and it's devastating and what a blow to the community. But understanding that what was coming after that would strengthen our urban forest has really been, it's been a great experience. Thanks to
Ken,
people
tell
like
us
Ken.
why replacing the amber maples is a good idea.
Well,
Lakefront
since you
Park.
brought it up, the amber maple is a very beautiful decorative tree. Shorter stature maple has a brilliant fall color, but it's very seedy and therefore spreads that's what's meant by invasive. It spreads very quickly and can inhabit areas that should be growing native plants. So we want to get trees that are not as aggressive in spreading around and are native and provide habitat and food for our wildlife.
Where is the Amur River?
The Amur River is in Siberia.
Siberia. And so it's not a native plant. Chances are that its seeds, its pollen, its whatever is of no benefit to native species of birds and the like.
As a homespun ecologist, you're right on in terms of use of native plants. And we're bringing back, Dave mentioned, most of those plants that the Rotarians are selling. In fact, all but the hawthorn are native to this area. So we want to try and set an example, and that's really what the Urban Forestry Board is trying to do, putting good information on the website, having these events and reaching out through the tree treks. We try to set an example for how we would like to see our homeowners in Hudson respond to the emerald ash borer threat.
And we invite people to come to the Urban Forestry Board meetings too. We've had several citizens come throughout that Vine Street project.
Right.
A couple people last time who just had questions about what was going on with trees in their neighborhood. So
Yes. Your Urban Forestry Board meets every third Wednesday of the month at 6:30 p.m. in City Hall, so you're all welcome to come.
There's a way to go to the city website and put your email address in there so you'll receive automatic notices of the Urban Forestry Board meetings, and I recommend it to all of you. Tell us again, Ken, why some preemptive cutting of trees happens?
It's really to slowly take care of what we know will be inevitable. We're going to lose all of our ash trees at some point down the road. But as Liz had mentioned earlier, the whole idea is to selectively remove some of the ones that are in poor structural shape, either interfering with utilities or buckling sidewalks. They may be crowding out other trees or won't be missed if we cut them down. So there's some strategic reasons for us to slowly remove those ash trees from the population, but we're also treating the very best. And our goal there is to treat roughly 140, 150, about 10% of the original ash population. So,
could the city move faster? Putting aside the question of should the city move faster, would it be possible for the city to move faster, making the transition from ash to diverse species?
I think it would take more of an investment. Right now, the program that's funded it does a good job of maintaining what we have, but the impact that emerald ash borer is going to have is going to make more of a drastic and rapid change to our urban tree canopy, and we're going to have to invest in more protective treatments, more planting of a variety of trees, and even more both labor and equipment and contractual money to have these ash trees removed before they become public safety hazards.
I believe that the board has been told that the city can use the gravel bed nursery that you talked about as the great way to get trees started from bare root to their fall planting season, and can pretty well fill the gravel bed nursery and then outplant those trees into their permanent locations in the fall, but then they need to be watered the next year.
That's right.
And that number of trees is about all the city crew can handle.
That's right.
At this time. Is that right?
That's right. Right now we're planting roughly 30 to 50 trees a year out of our gravel bed, and those trees very often will have what's called a gator bag. It's a green bag, kind of triangular shape, you'll see around newly planted trees, and it zips up around there, and you put the hose in and fill it up, about 25 gallons, and it seeps slowly to water the tree. So you'll see these gator bags on newly planted trees all over the city. I will also mention that David said that these trees that are for sale are available to anybody in the school district, and we've been trying to reach out to North Hudson and other townships around as well as the school district. We got a grant one year to build a second gravel bed, and that's available for our neighboring communities and the school district to have their own source of bare root trees at a very economical price. So we're all in this together, and the more that we act as a regional concern and body of not only knowledgeable people but volunteers, the better we're going to be able to deal with emerald ash borer, spread those costs out over further more time.
In fact, the city and the school district have partnered, haven't they, for at least 2 years now on ordering trees
Right.
Under one order, and then the school district has outplanted them using their own staff to
That's
put
right.
them around schools, and they've been quite proactive in that. They're to
partnership,
be congratulated.
that partnership is 3 years old now.
Yeah, and partnerships between the Urban Forestry Board and the schools are not new with the tree treks, are they, Liz? Do you remember the other thing that we had kids doing with their student-led inventories a year or two ago?
Yes, yep, that was another, I think John Mueller, again, was kind of spearheading that, and it was really about kids going home, looking around their backyards and their neighborhoods to see how many ash trees there were. And that's very helpful to know, to help the city keep up with where they are, what kind of shape they might be in, looking for those woodpeckers that they might be seeing on the trees. So kids are great at that, and you just need to, I'm assuming on the website also we have how to identify
Yes.
an ash tree. So
Yes.
you can take a look at that and look around your backyard
Yes.
and keep a watch on things and let us know. Contact us and let us know if.
That project that Liz was describing was an effort to get an idea about how many ash trees were on private property. And we don't have a good handle, but we fear that there are quite a bit more on private property, and we just don't see them. Or
Would you expect them to be in roughly the same proportion? Roughly a quarter of all the trees on private property are ash?
might even be more, certainly more maples, but quite a few more ash on private property as well.
I know there have been some discussions at the Urban Forestry Board meetings, and I'm an example of one of those people who comes to the meetings but isn't a member, because I couldn't be, because I live in the township of Hudson. And there has been discussion from time to time about what will all the private homeowners do when the ash trees start dying on their property. Is there something that we can do through economies of scale, through contracting or whatever? Is there anything you care to say about that, Ken?
This is something that the Urban Forestry Board is discussing and will continue to. We're looking to communities in Minnesota that have been dealing with it, and especially southwest and southeast Wisconsin, who have been dealing with this for over 10 years now, actually removing ash trees that are infested. And they have come up with a variety of alternatives to sort of put the cost to have a tree removed on private property and put that cost on the tax roll and have people pay it over time. But that's to be discussed. That's probably a little bit too early.
It would be, yeah, it would be good to have lots of input on that and lots of ideas and try to get ahead of it. You know, if the emerald ash borer starts killing trees in 2019 here, I've heard estimates that a high proportion, that more than half of the ash trees can be dead within 5 years. It can, am I way off base on that?
Not necessarily. It depends really on how much attention is put to early detection, protective treatment, and selective removal of trees that are in poor shape.
But there's no question it'll be a serious problem.
It will, and
be a problem for the city and a problem for private
homeowner,
owners.
yes.
But there are some things that can be done. We are not too far from District Energy. Isn't that the name of the outfit in St. Paul that burns wood chips?
That's right. They use wood fiber for about 75% of their fuel source to create electricity for most of downtown St. Paul and residential areas around downtown. And that's one way of utilizing the wood, that material that's coming down. But we're looking for the highest use, be it furniture, for parks. A variety of small businesses have sprung up down in the southern Wisconsin area. In fact, there's a whole network of businesses called the Wisconsin Urban Wood Network that is a good model for us to look at, as well as in the Twin Cities, many little businesses cropping up due to the availability of ash wood.
You got a sign behind you, and that probably deserves a little bit of attention.
Sure. I don't know if how well you can see this, but the sign says, "Burn it where you buy it," and this is a lesson we all could learn about how firewood movement can spread tree diseases and tree insects around faster than they would just by moving on their own. So movement of firewood is one way, and restricting the movement is one way to contain emerald ash borer, Dutch elm disease, oak wilt, a lot of tree disorders. So it's a good principle to keep in mind to burn it, purchase wood where you're going to burn it.
And when it is officially discovered in a county, then that county goes under a quarantine. Isn't that the Wisconsin rule? And then you can no longer move wood from that county.
It happens, you probably hadn't heard this, but that they are quarantining the whole state because it's so spread.
Oh.
So it's spread so far that the whole state is quarantined. So it allows more freer movement of wood, but it still is a wise idea to, keep it local and purchase wood where you're going to burn it.
Liz had to leave for one of the Destination Imagination meetings, and we're certainly grateful for her being here. Is there anything more that you wanted to say, Dave?
Well, I always when an elm tree would die, I could always look forward to morel mushrooms. I learned something here today that you can't leave those ash trees stand because they're brittle. So, we're excited to partner with the city. We want to encourage diversity and beauty in the community, and I really thank you for the opportunity.
We welcome Rotary's involvement and look forward to a lasting partnership there.
I want to just reiterate for our viewers that Saturday, April 29th, starting at 10 o'clock, would be the city observance of Arbor Day at Lakefront Park. Example of planting will go on. There's lunch planned. Rotarians will be there. The bonus planting will be later, after lunch, I presume. So that's April 29th at 10 o'clock.
28th.
Whatever day is Saturday.
Saturday is the 28th.
Is it 28th?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Saturday, April 28th at 10. Check out the City of Hudson website. Work your way down to the Urban Forestry Board and get on the list to have reminders of the meetings. And go to the Rotary websites, either club. Just go Hudson Rotary and they'll lead you to that, and the order form is there.
It'll also be a bonus attachment to the city website.
And yep, that's right. The order form, both the Rotary order form and the Hudson Tree of the Year form are on the city website, along with those planting instructions and a copy of the tree trek brochure, I'm sure, and other good stuff like that. So for Western Wisconsin Journal, this is Buck Malick.